Hello. Today we're going to take a look at how the corporate news media in the United States, as well as the U.S. government, have plied us with all sorts of propaganda with regard to Israel and how they have attempted to mold public opinion in favor of Israel. Now, there are lots of news media outlets via social media that has run stories that are counter to what the government wants you to believe. Unfortunately, there are also social media outlets that buy into the propaganda. And so let's show you a little bit of the propaganda right now. So this is Francesca Albanese from the United Nations reporting on what's really going on.
What's happening in Gaza is the shame of the century. Gaza has been erased. There is almost nothing left other than the despair of people who continue to perish there. Look at the acts of torture. Look at who's being killed. Doctors, nurses, students, mothers, children. 17,000 children. To look at what the soldiers have done and said. And then have the courage to say that this is not genocide. This genocide would have not been possible without the shocking cover-up by the media. The role that corporate media played in justifying crimes, in spreading misinformation, like the 40 beheaded babies.
We have some really disturbing new information out of Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister's spokesman just confirmed babies and toddlers were found with their heads decapitated in Kfar Aza in southern Israel after Hamas attacks in the kibbutz over the weekend.
The basic ethical principles governing their profession.
I choked up earlier reading this new revelation about 40 babies being killed.
Oh my God.
And some of them being beheaded. And I was like, how can any human being do that to a baby?
The role of international media, of Western media, in acting in defense of the acts of a genocidal state. This is unprecedented, but it's also revealing of the global situation we are facing. The fact that this is not just the genocide of the Palestinians committed by Israel. A number of Western countries are complicit, and so this is an opportunity to interrogate the system we live in, the checks and balances we have as a global community. How people in the West trying to stop the genocide have been repressed. There is momentum and goodwill to make a change, and people feel at loss because they look at their politicians who are in bad faith, especially those who claim to be human rights lawyers.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right.
They know that you cannot advocate for starvation. They know that you cannot doubt that a genocide is ongoing when the International Court of Justice has recognized the plausibility of genocide. You should act upon the recognition of that plausibility.
I'm well aware of the definition of genocide, and that is why I've never described this and referred to it as genocide.
So Israel seems to have some sort of immunity. Why? And the question might very well be in the Jeffrey Epstein tapes, which is why the U.S. government does its best not to release those tapes and pretty much follows the dictates of Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu wants, which is U.S. taxpayers' dollars to purchase U.S. military arms. 70% of Israel's purchase of military arms is from U.S. firms. So a lot of what's going on is the genocide of the Palestinians is really a redistribution of income and wealth, the lives of the Palestinians for profits by major U.S. corporations such as Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and others. The whole history of Israel has been told as one big lie, for the most part. I mean, there have been some truths about it, but let's let a Jewish journalist tell us about that history and about the propaganda that we have been inundated with, so that we support the U.S. government's financial backing of Israel's to commit genocide of the Palestinians. Let's take a look. So this is Aaron Matei, Jewish journalist, telling you what your government doesn't want you to know.
From the first day Israel never had a right to fire a single bullet into Gaza. They're the occupying power. Occupiers don't have self-defense rights. They have obligations. The only obligation was to end the occupation. That was never the conversation. It was always about Israel's so-called right to self-defense. And unfortunately, even some people who are defenders of Palestinian rights didn't fundamentally grasp that notion that, Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself against the population that it's been attacking and bombarding for its entire existence. It has the obligation to end the occupation, and then you can have peace. But because we've normalized occupation, we've normalized apartheid, Israel's response, quote unquote, just seemed routine. So even someone like Bernie Sanders, progressive U.S. politician, who was critical of Israel, he still constantly had to repeat the mantra, Israel has the right to defend itself against Hamas. And that's because we've been so successfully indoctrinated with this notion that this is a both sides conflict, there's parity, it's nuance. It's not. It's the simplest conflict in the world. One side is the occupying aggressor. And to resolve the conflict, that occupation, that aggression, has to end.
Israel does not allow foreign journalists into Gaza, has never allowed. So there were Al Jazeera journalists there, but they have been targeted and murdered, which is a war crime to target journalists. In addition, over 200 Palestinian journalists have been killed, and reportedly the average age of the average Palestinian journalist is 23 years because so many have been bumped off, over 200. So let's take a look at what's also going on, and we're going to use it courtesy of Amy Goodman.
Protests and vigils continue worldwide, demanding accountability and justice following Israel's targeted assassination of Al Jazeera correspondent Nassal Sharif, along with 4 of his colleagues and a freelance journalist outside Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City Sunday. Here in New York, hundreds gathered outside the New York Times Tuesday, decrying what advocates say is the Western media's complicity with Israel's genocidal war on Gaza and the relentless killing of Palestinian journalists. In Texas, protesters mobilized outside the Dallas Morning News headquarters, demanding U.S. reporters speak out against Israel's attacks on the media. Similar actions took place in Los Angeles, outside Fox studios, and other U.S. cities, including Washington, D.C., where demonstrators rallied outside the offices of NBC, Fox, ITN, and The Guardian. Protesters gathered in Mexico City in solidarity with Gaza journalists. Mexico is the deadliest country in Latin America for media workers. Meanwhile, the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 Foundation and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights have filed a complaint at the International Criminal Court against Nassal Sharif's killers.
So as I said before, it's all about profit. It's all about taking taxpayer money, giving it to Israel, Israel then buying military goods from U.S. manufacturers such as Boeing, Lockheed Martin, etc. So it's a big Israel and the genocide of Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza, is a simple case of money laundering. And it's also a redistribution of their lives for profit. That's what's really going on. And this pattern has been followed for a long time. When we got into the war in Vietnam, using the same pattern of indoctrination, we got involved in Cambodia with the same indoctrination. The U.S. government used the same type of, and the U.S. corporate news media used the same type of propaganda back in the 80s. Go on down a long line. It's the same propaganda that is used and has been used. If this has helped you to understand everything that's going on in the United States, in Israel, in Gaza, please like, subscribe, or share.